The millionaire disguises himself as a homeless man to test and beg from the waitress he had fallen in love with, and was shocked by the way she treated him. The bustling noise of the Golden Rose restaurant filled the air with a mixture of lively conversations and the clinking of silverware against fine china. Amidst this elegant atmosphere, Sarah Foster moved gracefully between the tables, her waitress uniform impeccable and her radiant smile hiding the story of a life that was once filled with luxury and privilege. With each dish she served, each order she took, Sarah reminded herself that this was temporary. Someday, she promised herself, she would have the life she once had, but this time through her own merits. Her eyes, a deep brown that seemed to hold secrets, scanned the room attentively, making sure every customer was satisfied. It was at that moment when the restaurant door opened, letting in a gust of cold air and the hunched figure of a man who seemed out of place in the luxurious establishment. His worn clothes and unkempt beard contrasted sharply with the refined ambiance of the place. Sarah's eyes fell on the newcomer, and for an instant she felt a pang of compassion mixed with something else, something she couldn't identify at that moment. Without thinking twice, she approached the man before the maitre d' could throw him out. "Good evening, sir," Sarah said in a soft but firm voice. "Can I help you with anything?" The man looked up, and Sarah found herself looking into intense blue eyes that seemed out of place on that weathered face. For a moment, she thought she saw a flash of something more in that gaze, but she attributed it to her imagination. I was just looking for a warm place for a moment," the man muttered, his voice hoarse but with an educated tone that surprised Sarah. Without knowing why, Sarah made an impulsive decision. "Come with me," she said, guiding the man to a table in a discreet corner of the restaurant. "I'll bring you something hot to drink." As she walked away to fetch a cup of coffee, Sarah didn't realize that the man was following her with his gaze, a mixture of curiosity and something deeper in his eyes. What Sarah didn't know was that this man, dressed as a homeless person, was actually Michael Alden, the eccentric millionaire who had decided to test human kindness in the most extreme way possible. And at that moment, without knowing it, they had both taken the first step on a path that would change their lives forever. Michael observed Sarah as she moved through the restaurant, her natural grace evident in every movement. There was something about her, an inner strength that shone through her humble exterior, that instantly captivated him. For a moment, he forgot about his plan, his disguise, everything, except the young woman who had shown him kindness without expecting anything in return. When Sarah returned with a steaming cup of coffee, Michael felt his heart race. "Thank you," he murmured, taking the cup with trembling hands. "That's very kind of you." Sarah gave him a warm smile. "It's nothing, we all deserve a little kindness, don't you think?" At that moment, as their gazes met across the table, something changed in the air between them. Neither of them knew it yet, but that chance encounter would be the beginning of a story that would test their hearts, their principles, and everything they thought they knew about love and trust. Michael Alden looked at himself in the mirror of his luxurious penthouse, observing how his clean-shaven face and perfectly combed hair contrasted with the image of the homeless man he had portrayed the night before. His blue eyes, normally cold and calculating, were now filled with confusion and a hint of something he hadn't felt in years. Hope. The memory of Sarah, the waitress at the Golden Rose restaurant, persisted in his mind like a light in the darkness of his existence. Her selfless kindness had touched something deep within him, something he believed had died long ago. With a sigh, Michael moved away from the mirror and headed to the window that dominated the view of the city. As he contemplated the urban skyline, memories of his past assaulted him with overwhelming force. 5 years ago, Emily's laughter echoed in the air as she ran along the beach, her golden hair waving in the wind. Michael chased her, feeling more alive than ever. "Come on, Mike!" Emily shouted, turning to look at him with her green eyes full of joy. "Don't tell me the great businessman can't catch a simple girl." Michael increased his speed, finally catching her in his arms and spinning her in the air. Their laughter mingled with the sound of the waves. "I love you, Emily," Michael whispered, looking into her eyes. I want to spend the rest of my life with you." Emily's smile faded slightly. "Mike, you know I love you too, but your world, all that pressure, the media, I don't know if I can handle it." Michael hugged her tightly. "We'll figure it out together. I promise." But that promise was never fulfilled. 2 weeks later, Emily was fleeing from a horde of paparazzi in her car, lost control on a curve, and Michael closed his eyes tightly, trying to block out the memory of the accident that had taken Emily away from him. Since then, he had immersed himself in his work, building an even larger financial empire but feeling increasingly empty inside. Back in the present, Michael made a decision. He couldn't allow himself to feel again. He couldn't risk another life for his selfishness. Sarah deserved better than him, someone without the weight of his past and his fortune. But even as he told himself this, a part of him yearned to see Sarah again, to feel that warmth she had awakened in his frozen heart. With determination, Michael headed to his closet and took out the worn clothes he had worn the night before. Tonight, he would return to the Golden Rose, not as the millionaire Michael Alden, but as the nameless homeless man who had caught Sarah's attention. Meanwhile, in a small apartment on the other side of the city, Sarah Foster prepared for another day of work. She looked at her reflection in the cracked bathroom mirror, remembering the days when she had full-length mirrors and a team of stylists at her disposal. The sound of a persistent cough pulled her from her thoughts. "Dad," she called, quickly leaving the bathroom. "Do you need anything?" In the small living room, converted into an improvised bedroom, her father, Charles Foster, lay in a hospital bed. A shadow of the strong and powerful man he once was, he now struggled against an illness that doctors couldn't name, but that Sarah suspected was the result of stress and shame from having lost everything. "I'm fine, honey," Charles responded weakly. Just remind me why we're doing this, why we're not accepting help from our old friends." Sarah sat on the edge of the bed, taking her father's hand. "Because they weren't real friends, Dad. They turned their backs on us when we needed them most. We're going to get through this on our own, I promise." Charles nodded weakly, closing his eyes. Sarah looked at him with a mixture of love and determination. She would do whatever it took to return her family to where they belonged, but this time she would do it with integrity and by her own means. As she prepared to leave, the face of the mysterious homeless man from the night before appeared in her mind. There was something in his eyes, a depth and a sadness that seemed out of place in someone from the street. Sarah shook her head, pushing those thoughts away. She had more important things to focus on. What Sarah didn't know was that tonight, her encounter with the homeless man would mark the beginning of a journey that would test everything she thought she knew about herself, about love, and about the true meaning of wealth. Night fell over the city as Sarah entered the Golden Rose for her evening shift. The restaurant buzzed with activity. The tables filled with elegant diners and the tinkling of crystal glasses filled the air. Sarah moved between the tables with the grace of someone born for this world of luxury, although now she observed it from the other side of the mirror. As she attended to a group of executives, her eyes drifted towards the entrance. Her heart skipped a beat when she saw the homeless man from the night before timidly enter, his hunched figure contrasting strongly with the luxurious atmosphere of the restaurant. Without thinking twice, Sarah approached him before the maitre d' could intervene. "Good evening," she said with a warm smile. "Would you like to sit at the same table as yesterday?" The man, who was none other than Michael in disguise, nodded gratefully. "You're very kind," he murmured, following her to the corner table. As Sarah walked away to fetch him a coffee, Michael observed her with a mixture of admiration and guilt. Every kind gesture from Sarah made his heart race, but it also intensified his feeling of deceiving her. On the other side of the restaurant, an elegant man entered with a confident step. Nathan Morris, with his impeccable suit and charming smile, scanned the place until his eyes fell on Sarah. A smile of recognition crossed his face. "Sarah Foster," he exclaimed, approaching her. "What a surprise to find you here." Sarah visibly tensed upon recognizing Nathan. "Nathan," she responded coldly, I didn't expect to see you on this side of town. Nathan chuckled softly. Business brings me here. But tell me, what's the foster heiress doing working as a waitress? Sarah clenched her fists, struggling to maintain her composure. Circumstances change, Nathan. Some of us know how to adapt with dignity. From his corner, Michael observed the interaction with growing interest and a pang of jealousy. He didn't want to admit. Nathan, far from feeling offended, seemed intrigued. I always admired your spirit, Sarah. How about we have dinner together one night, for old time's sake? Before Sarah could respond, the restaurant manager approached her with a worried expression. Sarah, there's a problem in the kitchen. We need your help. Grateful for the interruption, Sarah excused herself and quickly headed to the kitchen. As she passed by Michael's table, she gave him an apologetic look. In the kitchen, chaos reigned. One of the chefs had cut himself, and they needed to reorganize the entire production line. Sarah, with a calmness that surprised even her colleagues, took control of the situation. Marco, you handle the appetizers. Louisa, move to the main courses, I'll take care. Of desserts, she ordered with authority. In a matter of minutes, the kitchen was functioning efficiently again. As she worked on the desserts, Sarah couldn't help but think about the contrast between her current life and her past. She remembered the luxurious parties, the designer dresses, the jewelry, and how all of that had vanished in the blink of an eye when her father's financial empire crumbled. Back in the dining room, Nathan had sat at a table near Michael's, observing the apparent homeless man with interest. Something about the man's posture, the way he observed the restaurant, seemed familiar to him. Michael, aware of Nathan's gaze, sank deeper into his seat, internally cursing his decision to return to the restaurant. The risk of being discovered was high, but the need to see Sarah had been stronger. When Sarah finally returned to the dining room, with forced professionalism, Nathan smiled, his eyes roaming Sarah in a way that made her feel uncomfortable. I see the years have treated you well, despite the circumstances, he commented, ignoring the question about the order. You know, I always regretted how things ended between us. Sarah gripped her notepad tightly. Nathan, I'm working. If you're not going to order, I'd appreciate it if you didn't waste my time. Nathan's smile tensed slightly. Come on, Sarah. You know you could be in a much better place than this. Let me help you for old time's sake. At that moment, a crash resounded through the restaurant. All eyes turned to the source of the noise, Michael's table. The man had stood up abruptly, knocking over his chair in the process. His eyes, normally soft, burned with barely contained fury as he looked in Nathan's direction. Sarah, surprised by the supposed homeless man's reaction, quickly approached him. Is everything okay? She asked with genuine concern. Michael seemed to come out of a trance. He looked at Sarah, then at Nathan, and finally at the rest of the restaurant that was observing them. I'm sorry, he muttered. I think it's better if I leave. Before Sarah could stop him, Michael hurriedly left the restaurant, leaving her confused and with a strange feeling of loss. Nathan, for his part, observed the scene with a mixture of curiosity and suspicion. There was something about that homeless man's reaction that didn't add up, and Nathan Morris was not a man who let mysteries pass him by. The following days were a whirlwind of emotions for Sarah. The image of the mysterious homeless man abruptly leaving the restaurant replayed in her mind, mixing with the discomfort produced by Nathan's persistent presence. One afternoon, as Sarah cleaned tables after closing, the manager approached her with a worried expression. Sarah, I need to talk to you, he said in a serious tone. Strange things have been happening in the restaurant. Some customers have reported the disappearance of valuable objects. Sarah's heart raced. What are you insinuating? She asked, though she feared she knew the answer. The manager sighed. I don't want to accuse anyone, but that man, the homeless one you've been serving, people have seen him lurking near the tables of wealthier customers. Sarah felt as if she had been punched in the stomach. Could it be true? Was the man who had awakened such intense feelings in her nothing more than a thief? I'll take care of this, she finally said, her voice barely a whisper. That night, Sarah waited at the restaurant entrance, determined to confront the mysterious man if he appeared, and as if fate had planned it, there he was, approaching with his characteristic gait. "We need to talk," Sarah said without preamble, guiding him to a nearby alley for privacy. Michael, still in his homeless disguise, followed her with a mixture of anticipation and fear. Had she discovered his true identity? Once in the alley, Sarah turned to him, her eyes shining with a mixture of pain and determination. "Who are you, really?" she asked. "And don't lie to me. I know you've been stealing from the restaurant customers." Michael felt as if he had been doused with cold water. Of all the accusations he expected, this was the last. "Sarah, I swear I haven't stolen anything, But before he could continue, a familiar voice interrupted them. Well, what an interesting scene." Nathan emerged from the shadows, his predatory smile illuminated by the dim streetlight. "Sarah, dear, did you really believe this vagrant had good intentions? Allow me to enlighten you." With a quick movement, Nathan approached Michael, and before he could react, ripped off his fake beard and removed his disheveled wig. Sarah gasped as she saw the real face of Michael Alden, the famous millionaire, emerge from behind the disguise. "Michael Alden," she exclaimed, taking a step back. "All this time, why?" Michael, exposed and vulnerable, looked at Sarah with a mixture of shame and plea. "Sarah, I can explain, But Nathan didn't give him a chance. "Explain what, Alden? How you've been playing with an innocent woman's feelings? Or how you've been sabotaging my company from the shadows?" Sarah looked from Michael to Nathan, her mind desperately trying to process the situation. "What is he talking about, Nathan?" Nathan smiled bitterly. "Oh, didn't you know? Your dear homeless man here is responsible for my family's ruin. And now it seems he was planning to do the same to you." Michael took a step forward, his face a mask of determination. "That's not true. Sarah, Nathan is manipulating the situation to—" But Sarah raised a hand, silencing him. Her eyes, once full of warmth, were now cold as ice. "I don't want to hear any more lies, not from either of you," she said, looking at both Michael and Nathan. "You've deceived me, you've manipulated me, and I'm sick of it." With those words, Sarah turned around and quickly walked away, leaving the two men in the alley, looking at each other with a mixture of hatred and guilt. As Sarah walked through the dark streets, tears flowed freely down her cheeks. She had believed she had finally found something genuine in her life, something untainted by wealth and deception. But once again, the world had shown her how wrong she was. What Sarah didn't know was that this night of revelations was only the beginning. The real tests and the real opportunities for love and redemption were yet to come. The following days were a whirlwind of emotions for all involved. Sarah, torn between the betrayal she felt and the undeniable attraction she still felt for Michael, immersed herself in her work with renewed intensity. Every dish she served, every table she cleaned, was an attempt to erase the memories of that night in the alley. Michael, for his part, was torn between shame for his deception and the desperate desire to explain himself. Several times he found himself outside the Golden Rose, observing from afar, waiting for a moment to talk to Sarah. But every time he saw her, his determination faltered. How could he explain that his lie had been born from a genuine desire to be loved for who he was, not for his fortune? Meanwhile, Nathan Morris wasted no time. With Michael's identity exposed, he saw the perfect opportunity to advance his plans. He began to frequent the Golden Rose more regularly, always looking for moments to talk to Sarah, to console her in her moment of vulnerability. One night, as Sarah finished her shift, Nathan was waiting for her outside the restaurant. "Sarah," he called softly, "can we talk?" Sarah hesitated for a moment, but finally nodded. They headed to a small nearby park, the silence of the night broken only by the sound of their footsteps. "I know you're going through a difficult time," Nathan began, his voice full of apparent concern. "I want you to know that I'm here for you. I always have been." Sarah looked at him, searching his eyes for some indication of sincerity. "Nathan, I appreciate your concern, but—" "Listen," he gently interrupted her. "I know I made mistakes in the past, but I've changed and I want to help you. You and your family?" Sarah's eyes widened in surprise. "My family?" What do you know about my family? Nathan smiled sadly. I know more than you think, Sarah. I know about your father's illness, about the financial difficulties you're going through. Let me help you. I can offer you a job in my company, one that would allow you to take care of your father and regain the life you once had. Sarah felt the world spinning around her. Nathan's offer was tempting, an easy way, out of all her problems. But something inside her screamed at her to be careful. I need time to think about it, she finally said. Nathan nodded understandingly. Of course, take all the time you need, but remember, Sarah, not everyone is like Michael Alden. Some of us really care about you. As Sarah walked home that night, her mind was a whirlwind of thoughts and emotions. Nathan's offer, Michael's betrayal, the weight of family, responsibilities, everything mixed into an overwhelming chaos. What Sarah didn't know was that, at that very moment, Michael Alden was facing his own demons. Sitting in his luxurious penthouse, he stared fixedly at a photo of Emily, his former girlfriend. I'm sorry, he whispered to the image. I'm sorry for not being strong enough, for letting fear control me, but no more. With determination, Michael stood up and went to his desk. There, he began to write a letter that would change everything. Dear Sarah, he began to write, I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but you at least deserve the truth. The whole truth, as Michael wrote, pouring his heart and secrets onto the paper. Across town, Nathan Morris was making his own plans. In his office, surrounded by documents and financial charts, a sinister smile played on his face. Soon, Michael Alden, he muttered to himself, soon you'll see how it feels to lose everything. And so, with these three souls in conflict, each struggling with their own truths and lies, the stage was set for a confrontation that would change their lives forever. The next morning dawned grey and rainy, as if the sky reflected the emotional turmoil of our story's protagonists. Sarah woke up early, her eyes swollen from a night of insomnia, and contained tears. Nathan's offer still echoed in her mind, tempting and dangerous at the same time. As she prepared breakfast for her father, Charles observed her with concern from his improvised hospital bed in the living room. Honey, he called softly, what's bothering you? You seem distant. Sarah tried to smile, but the smile didn't reach her eyes. It's nothing, Dad, just work fatigue. Charles shook his head. I know you, Sarah, you've always been strong, but you don't have to carry everything on your own. Tell me. With a sigh, Sarah sat on the edge of the bed, and little by little the words began to flow. She told him about Michael, his deception, Nathan's offer, her doubts and fears. Charles listened in silence, his face a mixture of understanding and concern. Sarah, he finally said, taking his daughter's hand, life has put difficult tests before us, it's true, but never forget who you are. You're a foster, and fosters don't bend to adversity. Trust your heart, daughter. It will guide you on the right path. Her father's words resonated with Sarah, giving her a strength she didn't know she needed. With a hug and a kiss on Charles's forehead, Sarah left the apartment, determined to face the day and the decisions that awaited her. Meanwhile, in his office in the city center, Nathan Morris was going over the final details of his plan. The documents scattered on his desk detailed a complex network of financial transactions, all designed to undermine Michael Alden's empire. Mr. Morris, his assistant interrupted from the door. Mr. Alden is here. He says it's urgent. Nathan tensed for a moment, but quickly regained his composure. With a cold smile, he nodded. Show him in. Michael Alden entered the office, his face a mask of determination. Nathan, he greeted dryly. Michael, Nathan replied, leaning back in his chair. To what do I owe the pleasure of your visit? Michael got straight to the point. I know what you're doing, Nathan. The movements in the market, the rumors that are circulating, it all points to you. Nathan feigned surprise. I don't know what you're talking about, Michael. I'm simply managing my business. Your business is designed to destroy my company, Michael spat. But that's not the worst part. You're using Sarah in your game. The mention of Sarah made Nathan's smile turn predatory. Me using Sarah? I think you're looking in the wrong mirror, my friend. Wasn't it you who disguised yourself as a homeless man to deceive her? Michael clenched his fists, struggling to maintain calm. I made a mistake, I admit it. But my feelings for Sarah are real. I won't allow you to use her as a pawn in your revenge against me. Nathan stood up, facing Michael. And who says my feelings for Sarah aren't real? I've known her for years. Michael. You're just an upstart who played with her emotions. The tension in the office was palpable. Both men stared at each other, years of resentment and rivalry, culminating in this moment. This ends now, Nathan, Michael said firmly. You will stop your attacks on my company and stay away from Sarah. Nathan laughed humorlessly. Or what, Michael? You think you can threaten me? I have as much to lose as you do in this game, and I don't intend to back down. Before Michael could respond, his phone rang. Seeing the number, his face paled. I have to go, he said abruptly, heading for the door. This isn't over, Alden, Nathan shouted as Michael hurried out. Meanwhile, at the Golden Rose, Sarah was moving between tables with a distant mind. Her conversation with her father that morning had left her thoughtful, questioning every decision she had made in recent days. Suddenly, a commotion at the restaurant entrance caught her attention. A group of journalists had entered, cameras in hand, frantically searching for someone. There she is, one of them shouted, pointing directly at Sarah. It's her, the waitress who won the heart of millionaire Michael Alden. Sarah froze, the camera, flashes momentarily blinding her. How had they found out? Who had leaked the information? The restaurant manager tried to intervene, but the journalists were already surrounding Sarah, bombarding her with questions. Is it true that Michael Alden disguised himself as a homeless man to win you over? Did you know who he really was? Are you involved in the financial scandal surrounding Alden Enterprises? Sarah felt the world spinning around her. This was exactly what she had feared, what had made her doubt every relationship in her life since her family's fall. The exposure, the public scrutiny, the loss of privacy. At that moment, as if fate had planned it, Michael Alden came running into the restaurant, seeing the scene, his face filled with guilt and determination. Sarah, he shouted, making his way through the journalists. I'm sorry. This is my fault. But before he could reach her, Sarah made a decision. With an apologetic look to her boss, she took off her apron and ran out through the kitchen door, leaving behind the chaos and the voices shouting her name. She ran through the city streets with no clear destination, just wanting to escape from everything and everyone. Tears clouded her vision as questions crowded her mind. How had it come to this? Who could she really trust? Was there any way out of this maze of lies and deceptions? What Sarah didn't know was that her flight was about to lead her to an encounter that would change the course of the entire story. An encounter that would test not only her heart, but also her integrity and everything she thought she knew about love and trust. Sarah ran aimlessly through the city streets, her mind a whirlwind of emotions and confused thoughts. Finally, exhausted and disoriented, she stopped in a small park. She sat on a bench, trying to catch her breath and put her ideas in order. It was then that she noticed an old woman sitting next to her, looking at her with understanding eyes. You seem to be carrying the weight of the world on your shoulders, dear, the old woman said, in a soft voice. Sarah, normally reserved, found herself pouring her heart out to this stranger. She told her about Michael, about Nathan, about the pressure from the media and her own doubts. The old woman listened in silence, nodding occasionally. When Sarah finished, the woman spoke. You know, in my long life, I've learned that appearances can be deceiving, but the heart rarely makes mistakes. The question is, are you listening to yours? Those words resonated deeply with Sarah. Before she could respond, her phone rang. It was an unknown number. With trembling hands, she answered. Sarah Foster? Said a female voice on the other end of the line. This is Dr. Martinez from Central Hospital. It's about your father. Sarah's heart stopped for a moment. What's happening with my father? His condition has worsened, the doctor explained. We need to perform emergency surgery, but the cost. Sarah closed her eyes, feeling the world crumbling around her. I understand, she said in a trembling voice. "I'll be there as soon as possible." As she hung up, Sarah realized that the old woman had gone, leaving in her place a small note. "The truth always comes to light. Trust your heart." With renewed determination, Sarah headed to the hospital. On the way, she made a decision that would change everything. She called Nathan Morris. Meanwhile, in the offices of Alden Enterprises, Michael was struggling to contain the crisis. Rumors of financial instability had spread like wildfire, and stocks were plummeting. "Mr. Alden," his assistant interrupted, "you have a call from the board of directors. They're considering voting to remove you as CEO." Michael felt the ground opening beneath his feet. Everything he had worked for was in danger of crumbling. And the worst part was that he knew he had brought this upon himself with his actions. At that moment, his personal phone rang. It was a message from Sarah. "Central Hospital now. It's important." Without thinking twice, Michael left everything and ran out towards the hospital. At Central Hospital, Sarah waited anxiously in the waiting room. Her father was being prepared for surgery, but the payment issue still needed to be resolved. Nathan arrived first, his face a mask of concern. "Sarah, I came as soon as I could. What do you need?" Before Sarah could respond, Michael burst into the room. Seeing Nathan, his face hardened. "What are you doing here?" "I called him," Sarah intervened, her voice firm. "I called both of you." The two men looked at her in surprise. "My father needs urgent surgery," Sarah explained. "A surgery I can't afford. So here we are. You two who say you care about me, who say you love me, prove it." Michael and Nathan looked at each other, the rivalry and resentment evident in their eyes. "I'll pay for the surgery," Nathan said quickly. "No," Michael interrupted. "I'll do it." Sarah raised a hand, silencing them. "I don't want your money, I want the truth. The whole truth about you, about your intentions, about everything that's been happening. And I want it." Sarah smiled through her tears. "I'm fine, Dad, and you will be too, I promise you." As she held her father's hand, Sarah made a decision. A decision that would change not only her life, but that of everyone involved in this complicated story of love, lies, and redemption. What Sarah didn't know was that her decision would trigger a series of events that would test not only her love, but also her integrity and everything she thought she knew about herself and others. The real challenge was just beginning. The following days were a whirlwind of emotions and difficult decisions for everyone involved. Charles Foster's surgery was a success, thanks to a mysterious anonymous benefactor who covered all expenses. Sarah suspected who it might be, but decided not to investigate for the moment. While her father recovered, Sarah made a radical decision. She quit her job at the Golden Rose and, to everyone's surprise, accepted a position at Nathan Morris's company. Her reasoning was simple. She wanted to understand the business world from the inside to never again be a victim of others' machinations. Michael, for his part, faced the biggest crisis of his career. The board of directors of his company had called an emergency meeting to decide his future as CEO. As he prepared to face the board, he couldn't stop thinking about Sarah and how his actions had affected not only his life, but that of everyone around him. The morning of the board meeting, Michael received an unexpected visit in his office. It was Sarah. "Sarah," he said, surprised, "I didn't expect to see you here." Sarah looked at him with a mixture of emotions in her eyes. "I came because I think you need to hear something before that meeting." Michael looked at her expectantly, his heart beating. "First, what you did disguising yourself and deceiving me was unforgivable," Sarah began. "But I also understand why you did it. Fear can make us commit terrible mistakes." Michael lowered his gaze, the guilt evident on his face. "However," Sarah continued, "what you do now, how you handle this crisis, that will define who you really are, not just as a businessman, but as a person." Her words hit Michael hard. He looked at Sarah, seeing in her the strength and integrity that had captivated him from the beginning. "Thank you," he said softly. "I don't know if I'll ever be able to earn your forgiveness, but I promise you, I'll do the right thing." Sarah nodded, a small smile on her lips. "That's all I ask." With that, she turned to leave but stopped at the door. "And Michael, thank you for the hospital. I know it was you." Before Michael could respond, Sarah was gone, leaving him with a renewed determination to face what was coming. Meanwhile, in Nathan Morris's offices, the atmosphere was one of contained celebration. Rumors of Michael Alden's fall had caused Nathan's company's stocks to rise considerably. "Sarah," Nathan exclaimed upon seeing her enter, just in time for the good news. "It seems our friend Alden is about to lose everything." Sarah looked at him coldly. "And that makes you happy, Nathan?" Nathan's smile faltered for a moment. "Well, it's just business, dear. Besides, after what he did to you, I thought you'd be happy." Sarah shook her head, her gaze firm. "Revenge never brings happiness, Nathan. I thought you would have learned that by now." Before Nathan could respond, his assistant rushed into the office. "Mr. Morris, you have to see this," he said, turning on the TV on the wall on the screen. Michael Alden was standing in front of a podium surrounded by journalists. His face showed a determination that Sarah had never seen before. "Good afternoon," Michael began. "I have called this press conference to make an important announcement. After much reflection, I have decided to resign from my position as CEO of Alden Enterprises." A murmur of surprise ran through the press room. Nathan smiled triumphantly, but Sarah noticed that Michael wasn't finished. "However," Michael continued, "this is not the end of Alden Enterprises. Over the past few weeks, I have been working on a restructuring plan that will not only save the company, but make it stronger and more ethical than ever." Michael proceeded to detail a plan that involved selling non-essential assets, reinvesting in sustainable technologies, and a new corporate social responsibility program. But what really caught everyone's attention was his final announcement. "And to demonstrate my commitment to this new direction, I will donate 50% of my personal fortune to a foundation dedicated to helping small business owners and disadvantaged communities. It's time we use our resources to make a real difference in the world." The press room erupted in applause and questions. Nathan turned off the TV, his face a mask of fury. "This is a trick," he shouted. "He's manipulating the press." Sarah, however, smiled. She knew Michael's words were sincere. "No, Nathan," she said softly. "This is what it looks like when someone decides to do the right thing." With those words, Sarah headed for the door. "I quit," she said simply. "What? You can't quit." Nathan exclaimed, "You just started." Sarah turned to him, her gaze full of determination. "I can and I am. I came here looking to understand this world. And I think I finally have. Thank you for the lesson, Nathan." As Sarah left the office, she felt as if a weight had been lifted from her shoulders. For the first time in a long time, she was sure of who she was and what she wanted. The following days were a whirlwind of activity. The press couldn't stop talking about Michael Alden's surprising decision. Many praised him as a visionary, others called him crazy, but no one could deny the impact his announcement had made. Sarah, for her part, stayed away from the media chaos. She focused on taking care of her father, whose health was improving day by day. It was during one of her visits to the hospital that she received an unexpected call. "Sarah Foster?" said a familiar voice on the other end of the line. "Yes," Sarah responded, intrigued. "This is Martha, Mr. Alden's assistant. He would like to meet with you, if possible. He says he has a proposal to make to you." Sarah hesitated for a moment, but her curiosity got the better of her. "All right," she finally said. "Tell him we'll meet tomorrow in the park, where we used to meet." The next day, Sarah arrived at the park with a mixture of anticipation and nervousness. She saw Michael sitting on a bench, dressed casually, very different from the powerful CEO he used to be. "Thank you for coming," Michael said when Sarah sat down beside him. "Your assistant said you had a proposal," Sarah responded. Getting straight to the point, Michael nodded, taking a deep breath before speaking. "The foundation I mentioned in the press conference, I want you to run it." Sarah looked at him surprised. "Me? But why?" "Because I trust you," Michael responded sincerely. "Because you've shown you have the heart and integrity needed to do something truly good in this world, and because I want to make amends for my mistakes and I believe this is the best way to do it." Sarah remained silent for a moment, processing the offer. "And what about us?" she finally asked. "About what happened between us?" Michael looked her in the eyes, his gaze full of regret and hope. "That depends on you, Sarah. I know I hurt you, and I'll understand if you can never forgive me. But if you give me the chance, I'd like to try to earn your trust again. This time, without disguises, without lies. Just me with all my faults and mistakes." Sarah felt her heart racing. She knew that the decision she made at this moment would change the course of her life. She looked at Michael, seeing in his eyes the sincerity that had always been there, even behind the homeless disguise, the foundation. Sarah began slowly. "Sounds like a wonderful project, and I think I could do a lot. Dove good at the helm of it." Michael held his breath, waiting for her answer. "As for us," Sarah continued, a small smile forming on her lips, "I think everyone deserves a second chance, but this time, let's take it slow, okay?" Michael's face lit up with a genuine smile. "Okay," he said, extending his hand. "Partners?" Sarah took his hand, feeling a familiar spark when she touched him. "Partners?" she confirmed. As they sat in the park, talking about their plans for the foundation and for the future, neither of them noticed the figure observing them from afar. Nathan Morris, with a mixture of anger and resignation on his face, turned around and walked away. He knew he had lost, not only Sarah, but also the battle he had been fighting for so long. What none of them knew was that this wasn't the end of their story, but just the beginning of a new chapter. A chapter full of challenges, growth, and perhaps a love stronger and truer than any they had known before. The following months were a whirlwind of activity for Sarah and Michael. The Alden Foundation for Community Development, as they finally called it, quickly became a beacon of hope for many people in need. Sarah immersed herself in her new role with passion and determination. Her personal experience of having gone from wealth to daily struggle gave her a unique perspective that proved invaluable to the foundation. She organized microcredit programs, training workshops, and community development, projects that began to change lives. Michael, for his part, remained true to his word. Although he was no longer the CEO of Alden Enterprises, he remained the main shareholder and used his influence to promote more ethical and sustainable policies. In addition, he worked side by side with Sarah at the foundation, contributing his business experience and network of contacts. Their relationship, as they had agreed, progressed slowly. They went out to dinner, spent time together working on foundation projects, and little by little, the trust between them was rebuilding. One afternoon, while reviewing proposals for a new project, Sarah noticed that Michael seemed distracted. "Are you okay?" she asked, gently touching his arm. Michael looked at her, a mixture of emotions in his eyes. "There's something I need to show you," he finally said. Intrigued, Sarah followed Michael to his car. They drove in silence through the city until they reached a neighborhood Sarah knew well. It was where she and her father had lived after losing their fortune. Michael parked in front of a building under construction. "Come with me," he said, taking Sarah's hand. They entered the building and went up to the top floor. There Sarah saw something that took her breath away. It was a spacious and bright area with views of the city, but what really caught her attention were the people working there. She recognized several of her former neighbors, those who, like her, had struggled day by day to survive. "What is this?" Sarah asked, excited. Michael smiled. "It's the Foundation's new community center. But it's not just that we've hired people from the neighborhood to build and manage it. It's an economic and social development project." Sarah felt tears filling her eyes. "Michael, this is incredible." "There's more," Michael continued, guiding her to a door. Upon opening it, Sarah saw a small apartment, modest but cozy. "It's for your father. I thought he might like to be close to the center, maybe even help when he feels better." Sarah turned to Michael, overwhelmed with emotion. Without thinking, she threw herself into his arms, hugging him tightly. "Thank you," she whispered, "for all of this." Michael hugged her back, feeling that he was finally doing things right. "No, Sarah. Thank you for giving me a second chance, for showing me what really matters in life." They looked into each other's eyes, and at that moment, all the history they had lived through, all the lies and misunderstandings, seemed to vanish. There were only the two of them left, stronger and wiser for the trials they had faced. Slowly, their faces drew closer. The kiss they shared was soft, full of promises and a love that had matured through difficulties. When they separated, Sarah smiled. "I think we're finally on the same path," she said softly. Michael nodded, his heart full of hope. "And it's a path I want to walk with you, if you'll let me." As the sun set over the city, bathing the community center in a golden light, Sarah and Michael stood there, embracing, contemplating the future they had built together, a future full of possibilities, of second chances, and of a love that had overcome all tests. But even in that moment of happiness, neither of them could imagine the challenges that still awaited them, because the past has a way of resurfacing when least expected, and the decisions of the present always have consequences in the future. While Sarah and Michael worked tirelessly at the Alden Foundation across town, Nathan Morris sank deeper and deeper into his own bitterness and resentment. The fall of his financial empire, accelerated by Michael's unexpected move, had left him in a precarious position. One night, as he drank alone in his now almost empty office, Nathan received an unexpected visit. It was Emily, Michael's ex-girlfriend, whom everyone believed dead. "Emily," Nathan exclaimed, believing the alcohol was playing tricks on him. "But you were dead?" Emily completed with a cold smile. "Almost. But it turns out I have a special ability to survive." Nathan stared at her, his mind working at full speed. "Why are you here? Why now?" Emily sat down across from him, her eyes shining with a mixture of cunning and revenge. "Because I think we have a common enemy, Nathan, and together we could destroy him." Meanwhile, at the Alden Foundation, Sarah and Michael were celebrating the success of their latest project. They had managed to implement a financial education program that was helping hundreds of families out of poverty. "I can't believe how far we've come," Sarah said, looking at the charts and testimonials on the office wall. Michael hugged her from behind, resting his chin on her shoulder. "And this is just the beginning," he murmured. Their moment of intimacy was interrupted by a knock on the door. It was Martha, Michael's assistant, with a worried expression on her face. "Mr. Alden, there's something you need to see," she said, handing him an envelope. Michael opened the envelope and pulled out a series of photographs. His face paled upon seeing them. They were photos of Emily, clearly recent, coming out of an office building. This is impossible," Michael muttered, collapsing into a chair. Sarah, alarmed by his reaction, took the photos. "Michael, who is she?" With a trembling voice, Michael responded, "It's Emily, my ex-girlfriend, the one I thought had died years ago." The silence that followed was deafening. Sarah felt as if the ground was opening beneath her feet. All the insecurities she had managed to overcome in recent months threatened to resurface. "What does this mean, Michael?" she finally asked, her voice barely a whisper. Michael looked up, his eyes full of confusion and pain. "I don't know, Sarah. I swear I had no idea she was alive. This changes everything." Sarah felt her heart shrinking. "Everything? Including us?" Michael quickly stood up, taking Sarah's hands in his. "No, not. That what I feel for you is real. Sarah, more real than anything I've ever felt before." But Sarah could see the doubt in his eyes, the internal conflict he was experiencing. "You need time to process this," she said softly, releasing his hands. "I understand." "Sarah, please," Michael began, but she was already heading for the door. "Call me when you've cleared up your feelings," Sarah said. And with that, she left the office, leaving Michael alone with his thoughts and the photographs that had changed everything. Meanwhile, in a luxurious hotel across town, Emily and Nathan were planning their next move. "Are you sure this will work?" Nathan asked, skeptical. Emily smiled, a dangerous glint in her eyes. "Trust me, Nathan. I know Michael better than anyone. I know exactly how to manipulate him." "What about the girl, Sarah?" Nathan inquired. "Ah, her," Emily said with disdain. She'll be collateral damage once we've destroyed Michael and recovered his fortune. You can have her if you want." Nathan frowned, surprised by Emily's coldness. For a moment he wondered if he was doing the right thing by allying with her, but the memory of his humiliation, of everything he had lost, stifled any doubt. "Fine," he finally said. "What's the next step?" Emily took an envelope out of her purse. "This," she said, showing him its contents. They were documents that seemed to prove that Michael had been involved in illegal businesses years ago, just before Emily's supposed accident. "But this is fake," Nathan said, examining the papers. "Of course it is," Emily responded with a malicious smile. "But no one will be able to prove it. And when these documents reach the press and the authorities, Michael's reputation will be destroyed. His precious foundation will crumble, and we'll be there to pick up the pieces." Nathan nodded, slowly, impressed by Emily's cunning. "And when will we make this public?" "Soon," Emily said, "but first I need to have a little meeting with my dear ex-boyfriend to prepare the ground." While Emily and Nathan conspired, Sarah walked aimlessly through the city streets, her mind a whirlwind of emotions. Part of her wanted to trust Michael, to believe that what they had was stronger than any ghost from the past. But another part, the part that had been hurt so many times, screamed at her to protect herself, to run before getting hurt again. Without realizing it, her steps led her to the park, where she used to meet Michael when he disguised himself as a homeless man. She sat on the same bench, memories flooding her. "Sarah?" A familiar voice pulled her from her thoughts. She looked up to see her father, Charles, standing in front of her. "Dad, what are you doing here?" she asked. Surprised, Charles sat down beside her, his face showing concern. "I saw you from the window of the community center. You looked troubled. What's going on, honey?" And so, under the soft light of the evening, Sarah told her father everything about Emily, about her fears, about the doubt that now overshadowed her relationship with Michael. Charles listened in silence, his face full of understanding. When Sarah finished, he took her hands in. "Here's my daughter," he began softly. "Life is rarely simple or easy. True love isn't the one that never faces obstacles, but the one that overcomes them together." Sarah looked at her father, her eyes full of unshed tears. "But what if Michael still loves her? What if everything we've built crumbles?" Charles smiled wisely. "Those are questions only Michael can answer. But remember this, Sarah, you are strong. You've overcome things that would have broken others. Whatever happens, I know you'll come out ahead." Sarah hugged her father, grateful for his support and words. As the sun set on the horizon, she made a decision. She would face this head-on. She would talk to Michael, listen to what he had to say, and together they would decide the path forward. What Sarah didn't know was that at that very moment, Michael was receiving a visit that would change the course of everything. A visit from someone he believed dead, someone who brought with her secrets and lies that threatened to destroy everything they had built. The stage was set for a confrontation that would test not only the love between Sarah and Michael, but also their integrity, their trust, and everything they believed in. And in the shadows, Nathan and Emily waited, ready to take advantage of any crack that might appear in the couple's relationship. The doorbell of Michael's apartment rang, pulling him out of his confused thoughts. When he opened the door, he felt as if the world had stopped. There, standing in front of him, was Emily. "Hello, Michael," she said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "It's been a long time." Michael was paralyzed, unable to process what he was seeing. "Emily, how is this possible? I thought you were dead?" she completed, entering the apartment without waiting for an invitation. "I almost was, but I decided I had a lot to live for, or rather a lot to fight for." Meanwhile, Sarah had made a decision. She couldn't keep waiting in uncertainty. She needed to talk to Michael, to face this situation together. With determination, she headed to Michael's apartment. In the apartment, Michael and Emily were facing each other in a tense conversation. "Why now, Emily? Why disappear all these years and come back just when—" Michael stopped, thinking of Sarah. Emily noticed his hesitation. "Just when you found someone else. That's Sarah, right?" Michael looked at her, surprised. How do you know about Sarah? Oh, Michael, Emily laughed humorlessly. I know. Many things. Like, for example, some shady business you were involved in just before my accident. Michael's face paled. What are you talking about? I never what, Michael? Emily interrupted, pulling some documents from her purse. Never made deals with shell companies to evade taxes, never manipulated the market for your benefit? Michael took the documents, his mind working at full speed. This is false, Emily. I never did any of this. Maybe, Emily said with a cold smile. But do you think anyone will believe you when this comes to light? Your precious foundation, your relationship with Sarah, everything will crumble. At that moment, the doorbell rang again. Michael, still in shock from Emily's accusations, opened the door without thinking. It was Sarah. Michael, we need to talk, Sarah began, but stopped when she saw Emily in the apartment. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't know you had company. The silence that followed was deafening. Michael looked from Sarah to Emily, his mind a whirlwind of emotions. And thoughts, Sarah, this isn't what it looks like, he finally said. Emily seized the moment to intervene. Oh, isn't it? Michael, dear, I think it's time we were honest. Sarah, feeling she was in the middle of something much bigger than she imagined, took a step back. I think I should go. No, Michael exclaimed, taking her hand. Please stay. We need to clear this up. The next few minutes were a roller coaster of revelations. Michael explained who Emily was, their history together, and the supposed accident Emily, for her part, insinuated about Michael's alleged illegal businesses, sowing doubt in Sarah. Michael, Sarah finally said, her voice trembling, is it true? Were you involved in illegal business? Michael looked her in the eyes, his face a mask of determination. Sarah, I swear on my life that I wasn't. These documents are fake. I don't know what's going on, but I promise you I'll find out the truth. Sarah wanted to believe him, but doubt had already been sown. I need time, she finally said, to process all of this. As Sarah headed for the door, Emily stopped her. Sarah, I know this is difficult, but I think you deserve to know the whole truth about Michael. Why don't we meet tomorrow, just us two? Sarah looked at Michael, who seemed to want to protest, but finally nodded. All right, Sarah said, tomorrow. When Sarah left, Michael turned to Emily, his face a mixture of pain and fury. What are you plotting, Emily? Why are you doing this? Emily smiled, but the smile didn't reach her eyes. Oh, Michael, this is just the beginning. Soon you'll understand what it feels like to lose everything. With those enigmatic words, Emily also left, leaving Michael alone with his thoughts and fears. Meanwhile, in a cafe across town, Nathan anxiously awaited news from Emily. When he received a text message with just 2 words, "It's done," he smiled with satisfaction. The plan was in motion, and soon, very soon, he would have his revenge. What none of them knew was that Sarah, despite her doubts and fears, was not someone who stood idly by. That night, while everyone slept, she began her own investigation. She was determined to uncover the truth, no matter how painful it might be. The stage was set for a final confrontation, one where hidden truths would be revealed, loyalties would be tested, and the future of all involved would be defined. And at the center of it all was Sarah, a woman who had learned the hard way to fight for what she believed in. The denouement was approaching, and with it, the promise of a new beginning or the end of everything they had built. The morning arrived with a palpable tension in the air. Sarah, who had barely slept, prepared for her meeting with Emily. She had spent the night investigating, looking for any clue that could shed light on the situation. Meanwhile, Michael had not been idle. Aware that his future and that of the foundation hung by a thread, he had summoned his legal team and private investigators to unravel the mystery behind the fake documents. In a downtown cafe, Sarah nervously waited for Emily's arrival. When she appeared, with her characteristic elegance and an enigmatic smile, Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. "Thank you for coming, Sarah," Emily said, sitting across from her. "I know this isn't easy for you." Sarah looked her directly in the eyes. "I want the truth, Emily, the whole truth." Emily smiled, but there was something cold in that smile. The truth, dear, is that Michael is not the man you think he is. Those documents you saw are just the tip of the iceberg. As Emily began to weave her web of lies, mixing half-truths with absolute falsehoods, Sarah listened attentively, looking for inconsistencies in her story. Across town, Michael had made a startling discovery. One of his investigators had managed to trace the origin of the fake documents to a shell company linked to Nathan Morris. With this new information, Michael hurried to call Sarah, but her phone went straight to voicemail. Desperate, he decided to go look for her. Back at the cafe, Sarah finally spoke. "It's a fascinating story, Emily, but there's something that doesn't add up." Emily looked at her, her confidence faltering for a moment. "What do you mean?" Sarah took out her tablet and placed it on the table. "Last night I did my own investigation, and I found something interesting about you and Nathan Morris." Emily's face visibly paled. "I don't know what you're talking about," she said, trying to maintain her composure. Sarah, with a calmness that surprised even herself, continued. "I found records of bank transfers between an account in your name and companies linked to Nathan Morris transfers that began right after your supposed accident." Emily tried to stand up, but Sarah stopped her with a gesture. "That's not all. I also discovered that the company that issued those fake documents about Michael is registered in the name of Nathan's cousin. Curious, don't you think?" At that moment, Michael burst into the cafe, panting from the run. "Sarah, I have to tell you something important about the documents." He stopped short upon seeing the scene in front of him, Sarah with a determined expression, and Emily, visibly shaken. "You're late, Mr. Alden," said a voice from a nearby table. Everyone turned to see Nathan Morris, who slowly stood up, applauding sarcastically. "It seems we underestimated Miss Foster." Emily looked at Nathan furiously. "Idiot, what are you doing here?" "Saving what's left of our plan," Nathan responded coldly. "Although it seems it's already too late." Michael approached Sarah, protectively placing himself by her side. "Are you okay?" he asked in a low voice. Sarah nodded, not taking her eyes off Emily and Nathan. "I'm fine. And I think we're finally getting to the bottom of all this." Nathan, seeing that his plan was crumbling, decided to play his last card. "Very well, since we're revealing truths, why don't you tell them, Emily, about our little agreement? About how we plan to destroy Michael and take his fortune?" Emily, cornered, exploded. "Shut up, you fool. This is all your fault if you had followed the plan to the letter." "The plan?" Sarah interrupted. "You mean the plan to fake your death, Emily? To manipulate Michael for years and then reappear to destroy him?" Michael looked at Emily, the pain and disbelief evident in his eyes. "Is that true, Emily? Did you fake your death?" Emily, seeing that she had no way out, dropped her mask of innocence. Her face transformed into a grimace of bitterness and resentment. "So what if I did? You drove me to it, Michael. With your obsession with work, with your inability to love me as I deserved. So you decided to ally yourself with Nathan," Sarah concluded, "to get revenge on Michael and get his fortune in the process." Nathan, seeing that all was lost, tried to sneak away but found himself blocked by two suited men who had just entered the cafe. "Mr. Morris," one of them said, showing a badge. "I'm Detective Johnson. You're under arrest for fraud, conspiracy, and forgery of documents." As the detectives handcuffed Nathan, Emily tried to flee, but Sarah stopped her. "Not so fast," she said, grabbing her arm. "I think you have a lot to explain to the authorities." Amidst the chaos, with Nathan and Emily being arrested and cafe customers watching in astonishment, Michael turned to Sarah. He looked at her with a mixture of admiration, love, and regret. "Sarah, I don't know what to say. Thank you for believing in me, for fighting for the truth." Sarah looked at him, a small smile forming on her lips. "I always knew there was more to this story, and after everything we've been through together, I couldn't just give up without a fight." Michael took her hands in his. "I love you, Sarah, more than I ever thought possible to love someone. Can you forgive me for doubting, for not being completely honest with you from the beginning?" Sarah looked into his eyes, seeing in them the sincerity and love that had always been there, even in the most difficult moments. "Michael, we've both made mistakes, but I think what's important is that In the end, we chose to trust each other. We chose to fight for us. They embraced in the middle of the cafe, oblivious to the chaos surrounding them. At that moment, they knew that, whatever happened, they would face the future together. The following weeks were a whirlwind of statements, trials, and newspaper headlines. The truth about Emily and Nathan's conspiracy came to light, completely exonerating Michael of any suspicion of illicit activities. The Alden Foundation, far from being harmed by the scandal, gained even more public support. The story of how Sarah and Michael had fought together against adversity and deception touched the hearts of many people. A year later, in the same park where Michael and Sarah had first met, when he was posing as a homeless man, the couple celebrated their wedding. Surrounded by friends, family, and beneficiaries of the foundation, Sarah and Michael vowed eternal love. Charles Foster, fully recovered and radiant with pride, gave his daughter away at the altar. "I always knew you'd find your way, my little girl," he whispered before handing her over to Michael. As they exchanged vows, Sarah and Michael reflected on the incredible journey that had brought them to this moment. They had faced lies, betrayals, and doubts, but their love had prevailed. "I promise to love and respect you every day of my life," Michael said, his voice full of emotion. "I promise to always be honest with you and to fight by your side no matter what. And I promise to be your partner, your confidant, and your greatest defender," Sarah responded, tears of happiness in her eyes. "I promise to believe in you, in us, even in the most difficult moments." As they kissed, sealing their union to the applause of the guests, they both knew that this was not the end of their story, but the beginning of a new chapter, a chapter filled with love, trust, and the promise of a bright future together. And so, in a city that had witnessed their struggle and triumph, Sarah and Michael began their life together, not as a fallen heiress and an eccentric millionaire, but as two people who had found in each other their true home and strength. Sarah and Michael's story became a legend in the city, a testament to the power of true love and perseverance. And although they knew that life would continue to present them with challenges, they were ready to face them, hand in hand, with the certainty that together they could overcome any obstacle. Because in the end they had learned the most valuable lesson of all, that love, when it is true and strong, can overcome any adversity, illuminate the darkest shadows, and build a future brighter than they could have ever imagined.